choose your own adventure novels. You guys ever seen those? I had one. I checked out one from the library to bring, and of course I've been kind of scatterbrained, so I left it in my room 20 feet that way. But you guys ever heard of those, the choose your adventure novels?
Yep.
You kind of wander through and you come to a page, and then you get to choose your own adventure, right? If you want this option, you go to this page, and if you want this option, you go to this page. It's kind of like early reality television, The audience gets to choose the ending of the story. I love these things growing up. Inevitably, I always read every ending, every page. I never just chose one way, because that's boring. I wanted to see what had the happiest ending. Do I need my back? There we go. I wanted to see which one had the happiest ending. But we can't do that in life, can we? We can't ever turn back and act as if we didn't just choose this fork in the road. But I do think this choose your own adventure is a good metaphor for life, and I think it's a good metaphor for our passage today. So you can start turning your Bibles to Deuteronomy 30, 11 through 14. We'll get there in a moment. So here's what it would look like, a choose your own adventure novel for life. Here's how this recently went in my life, all right? Zach has hit a fork in the road. Choose what his next steps will be. Will he, A, stay in Baker City, continue in his life of comfort and luxury, hiking in the summers, paying off student loans, and serving the teens? And then you got your parentheses. Go to page 7. B, get a new dog, have another baby, and watch soccer until the U.S. finally wins the World Cup. Go to page 36. Or C, move to Pasadena, without a job, without a place to live, without friends, and trust that God will somehow, some way provide.
Amen.
Go to page 125. So, Bree and I had a moment in life where we got to the end of the chapter, and we had to choose which page we were going to read next. So we prayed about it, talked it over, and took the first baby steps and went to page 125, Pasadena. Here's the thing, though. Bree and I, we could have chosen many different options, and I think we still could have been faithful. I think we could have stayed in Baker City for a couple more years and still been faithful. I think 3 years ago, before we moved to Baker City, we could have taken another church. We could have gone another direction and still been faithful, and I think God still would have used our ministry. I think it's a great thing when you're walking with Jesus because there are a lot of different options open to us. There's not just one option. We have a lot of different ways we can be faithful. That's awesome. It's awesome to be under the umbrella of God's grace and God's faithfulness. But other times, we begin to make decisions that lead towards an unhappy ending, just like we had to choose your own adventure novel. We go through this store and then this store, and slowly but surely we realize that we've made some mistakes, but we can't turn back because it's not a novel, it's life. And sometimes these decisions, we don't notice we're going in the wrong direction. It's slow, it's subtle. And by the time we get there, and by the time we realize it's a bad decision, we've made several bad decisions, it seems like it's too late. They seem like good decisions, but instead we wind our way through and end up with broken relationships, harmful addictions, and destructive habits. And that's what I'm worried about. And that's what I see Moses worrying about too here in Deuteronomy 30. So Deuteronomy 30, 11 through 20, and I'm going to be reading from the ESV. Deuteronomy 30, 11 through 20. Oh, that's just a part of it. All right. For this commandment that I command you today is not too hard for you, neither is it far off. It is not in heaven that you shall say, who will ascend to heaven for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us, that we may hear it and do it? But the word is very near you. It is in your mouth, and it is in your heart, so that you can do it. See, I have set before you today life and good, death and evil. If you obey the commandments of the Lord your God that I command you today, by loving the Lord your God, by walking in his ways, and by keeping his commandments and his statutes and his rules, then you shall live and multiply, and the Lord your God will bless you in the land that you are entering to take possession of it. But if your heart turns away, and you will not hear, but are drawn away to worship other gods and serve them, I declare to you today that you shall surely perish. You shall not live long in the land that you are going over the Jordan to enter and possess. I call heaven and earth to witness against you today that I have set before you life and death, blessing and curse. Therefore choose life, that you and your offspring may live, loving the Lord your God, obeying his voice, and holding fast to him. For he is your life and length of days, that you may dwell in the land that the Lord swore to your fathers, to Abraham, to Isaac, and to Jacob, to give them. Let's pray. God, thank you for this beautiful day. Thank you for the gift of friends and family all over the nation and all over the world. We ask that we would leave today more faithful than when we entered. Transform us and change us. We pray all this in your Son's name. Amen. So let me give you a little bit of context here, right? We're in Deuteronomy, and if you're like me, it gets a little fuzzy because it's a little repetitive, right? And Deuteronomy, second law, it's supposed to be repetitive. That's good. So you wind your way through the Old Testament, the Pentateuch, and they're at the edge of the Promised Land, right? They were delivered from Egypt, and they wandered through the wilderness for 40 years, and they get to the edge of the Promised Land, and that's where we get right here in Deuteronomy. And Moses, he delivers this, something like 34 chapters to the people. I'm sure they were standing for a long time waiting for lunch. I'm not going to preach that long. But they get to the end, and Moses delivers this sermon of sorts. And so he delivers the law again. That's a large portion of the chapter. And we get the first part. He recounts their story, all that they've been, delivered from Egypt, wandered, all that. Then he delivers the law, and that's about 3/4 of the book. And then we get to our text here, right? And here, Moses is calling for commitment for the people before they cross over to the Promised Land. So that's where we're at. They get this message right when they're on the edge, right about to go and take over, and we get into Joshua and Judges, where they take over and enter the Promised Land. So that's where we're at. And here, Moses makes it very clear that the people of God have options. They have options, right? Just like in a choose-your-own-adventure novel, you have options. You can go this way, you can go this way, you can go this way. You get to choose where you want to go. And they take those options. Quite often they choose an option, sometimes good, often bad. Sometimes they follow God, right? We see that. But often they turn to page 49, the grumbling page, or page 36, the golden calf page, or page 147, right? The rebellion page. They choose these different pages. And here, on the edge of the Promised Land, before they go and take the inheritance God has given them, Moses gives them a choice. He gives them a choice. And he actually, he commands them. It's imperative. He tells them, choose life. But they don't have to. He knows they don't have to follow the command. They have different options. And so he tells them, he says, these are your options. He lays the different roads out for them. He offers them the chance to make a commitment for God. And he tells them what lies on the different paths. So on the one path, you have life, good, prosperity, blessing, living in God's will. On the other side, you've got death, evil, adversity, curses, idols. Simple as that. Choose life, choose death. It seems simple. Choose life. Choose the one that leads to life and blessing. But the people of God don't always get it. Just like a choose-your-own-adventure novel. You don't always know where the path is going to take you unless you read every single path, like you can do in a novel. But sometimes, unless you cheat, sometimes you need to stop and think, where is this next page going to take me? Where is this next decision going to take me? What might be the next consequence if I choose to take that path? Some path leads towards a bad ending, and some lead towards a good ending. And this is where God has really challenged me in the past several months. I see so many pitfalls and hazards in our life. I see so many pages that we can turn to that lead towards an unhappy ending. They might seem like a good decision, but they're not. Ultimately, it leads towards an unhappy ending, a bad ending. but also a bad journey, because it's not all about the ending. It's also about the journey. It's about walking with Jesus. And too many of these pages that we choose seem like harmless stops in our story, but they're not. These seem harmless until we go and we go and we go, and we get a ways down and realize that it has been far from harmless. You know when you're watching a movie and you just know something bad is coming? We just watched, if you guys have seen Jurassic World, you know how dinosaur movies are. Lots of people get eaten by big dinosaurs. And they do such a good job with the music and the casting and all these things. There's this one part kind of earlier on the film, and they introduce this character. They don't tell you his name. He's going to die. They don't tell you his name. He's going to get eaten by a dinosaur. And he's in a park outfit, you know, that's Stripe 2. And just the way he's walking, they casted him perfectly. And you know the entire time, he's in the big dinosaur, he's in the big dinosaur cage, and he's walking along, and the entire time I'm going, no, don't go, you're going to die. Sure enough, big dinosaur, one scoop. You know it's coming, right? And to choose your own adventure, it would be like this, right? Zach walks through the dark hallway and reaches the end. Thunder booms and lightning flashes. Floorboards creak. Do you open the door at the end of the hallway, which the ghost is most certainly behind? Go to page 45. Or do you run the other way like a scared child and live to fight on a day that isn't so dark and creepy? Go to page 47, right? That's what it looks like. I'm going to page 47. I'm going to live to fight another day. We catch all the telltale signs in books and movies, but we seem to miss them all too often in daily life.
Amen.
So here's some paths that seem like a wise decision, but all too often take us down a road that slowly and subtly, but most assuredly lead away from life. And I'm going to start with paths that I'm tempted to take. Whenever you preach to a congregation you don't know very well, and I know you guys, you know, I've been here a lot, and I know Pastor Don, I hear lots about you guys, very positive things, he talks pretty out of you guys. But I want to start with this disclaimer, I guess starting with several minutes ago. I'm going to continue with this disclaimer. I'm preaching to myself here. This is what God has been doing in my life. I don't want to discourage, I want to encourage. So if it seems a little pointed in places, it's because that's what God's doing in my life. So here we go. These are paths I'm tempted to take and have taken. I all too often choose the path of happiness. I've got nothing wrong with being happy. I like to be happy. I hope you guys are happy. But when I reach the end of the chapter and I'm given two options, be happy or be faithful, I all too often choose happiness. I want my wife and son to be happy. Asher's smiling at me right now. I want the people to whom I minister to be happy. I want the people in my community to be happy. So all too often, instead of living a life of radical faithfulness, instead of challenging others to live lives of radical faithfulness, I take the easy road. I choose happiness. Another path I all too often choose, culture. Right? I love culture. And you can ask the teens, I'm not exactly on the up and up, but I still enjoy culture. I listen to the top 10 quite a bit on iTunes to see what the teens are listening to. I read articles about culture. I like watching television. I like watching movies. I like learning about the different ways people live. And all too often, I let that form me. You know, the Choose Your Own Adventure novel, it would be, will you, go to page 37. If you yell at that person that cuts you off, don't tell them about how often I talk to cars when I'm driving, guys. Will you yell at that person that cuts you off on the road? Or get even with that person that sets your career back, or whatever, Will you react like culture wants you to react? Or will you react like a Christian react? Will you choose life, or will you choose death? There are other paths that sometimes tempt us. How about the path of the American dream? That's a big temptation. It's great to better yourself. It's great to become prosperous. That's awesome. Work hard. John Wesley, here's what he said. Earn all you can, give all you can, save all you can. Right? That's great. But John Wesley, in the same sermon, he said we shouldn't earn all we can at the expense of life nor health. I think we do that sometimes. How about the path of sports? We were talking about this a little bit this morning in Sunday school. There's nothing wrong with competition. I'm a competitive guy. I didn't realize that until I met Bree, and she told me. There's nothing wrong with competition. There's nothing wrong with sports. I love sports. I love soccer. But when sports becomes an idol, when sports are leading us further away from choosing life, from loving the Lord your God, from walking in his ways, from obeying his voice, from holding fast to him, then we've chosen the wrong path. We've chosen the path of death and evil and adversity. There are lots of paths that seem right. They seem to lead to life. But instead, in the end, to choose your own adventure leads us the wrong way. It leads us to adversity, evil, and death. Sometimes the way of life seems muddy to us. But Moses tells the Israelites that they know the way. Can you bring up 11 through 14? For this commandment that I command you today is not too hard for you, neither is it far off. It is not in heaven that you should say, who will ascend to heaven for us and bring it to us that we may hear it and do it? Neither is it beyond the sea that you should say, who will go over the sea for us and bring it to us that we may hear it and do it? But the word is very near you. It is in your mouth and in your heart so that you can do it. He tells the Israelites they know the path to choose. They know what they're supposed to do. Normally in a sermon, this is where I would say, you guys know what to do, so go do it. But, you know, I mentioned the influence of culture in my life earlier. I mentioned how all too often I choose that path instead of the path of Jesus Christ, instead of the path of life. Moses says it's right there for us, but I don't know if it's right here for me. I'm not going to accuse you of anything. For me, I don't know if the story of God is right there. I don't know if his law is right there in my heart and in my mouth. I can quote episodes of shows and sing popular songs and share random useless trivia, ask my wife, and I can tell you how Ross responded when Rachel wrote a letter asking him to take full responsibility for the demise of their relationship. Right? And God has challenged me to make that less a part of my life and make the story of God more a part of my life. Instead of saying, here's how Ross handled it, maybe I can model my life after a story of God's faithfulness in my life, or a story of God's faithfulness in your lives, or a story of God's faithfulness in the Bible. I don't know if the story of God is the dominant story in my life. If it were, as it was with the Israelites, God's commandment would be on my heart, and it would be in my mouth. And God has really been challenging me to make that the dominant story in my life. I have this image that I really like. I'm sure I stole it from somewhere. I'm not sure who, but it's this image of a piggy bank, right? We've all got piggy banks. Asher's got a piggy bank. He's got more money than I do. And you know, you deposit your money in there, right? Like a normal bank. I think we all need a faithfulness piggy bank. So when God does something incredible in our lives or in the lives of the people around us, we can put a chip in there. God's faithfulness chip, right? And it gets fuller and fuller and fuller, and we should have lots of them because God is incredibly faithful. Anytime God's faithful, put a chip in there. And then when we forget about it, when we forget, we're going through hard times, when we forget that God is faithful, we can go to our piggy bank and break it open or pull off the plastic piece on the bottom and grab some chips and say, oh yeah, these are the things God has done in my history. This is the story of God. This is what I need to be reminded of. A faithfulness piggy bank. Then I can draw on the story of God when living out this adventure instead of the story of Ross and Rachel. And we have to engage in spiritual practices if we want to choose life, right? We have to read our Bibles. We have to share our testimony. We have to listen to the testimonies of others. We have to pray. And we have to ask God to give us eyes to see. This isn't legalism. This is just simply immersing ourselves in the story of God if we want to live life to its fullest. But here's something I found, and if you read Deuteronomy, you should really read it. It's a little repetitive, but it is so good. Here's what I found. The Israelites know the story. They know the laws. They know God. And yet, what do? They still don't seem to choose life. That's the thing that strikes me with Moses' words. He says it's very near us, so we can do it. Over and over again, he says, so you can do it. But I don't think we can. The Israelites didn't. At least not for very long. They failed over and over and over and over and over and over and over. And we seem to follow their example far, far too much. We can't choose life on our own. Even though we're talking about a choose-your-own-adventure novel, because that's how many of us tend to view life, that's how I tend to view life. When decisions come my way, right, I stop. I look at my options. I pray, ask for discernment, and then I open a door and go through it, right? It's a choose-your-adventure novel. All too often, that's how I view life. But in reality, I don't know if that's how life is meant to be lived. I don't know if that's how we're supposed to choose life. I think a better metaphor would be a participate in God's adventure novel. And when we're participating in God's adventure, when we're participating in God's story, it doesn't matter what page we turn to, or where we live, or where we work, or whatever. Because we are choosing day by day, minute by minute, moment by moment. We are choosing life. We are loving God. We are obeying His commands. We're holding fast to Him with every breath. And we realize that it's not our adventure, and it's never been our adventure. It's God's adventure. And every minute we get to spend following God and participating in God's story, God's adventure, is a minute spent joyfully living life to its fullest. And every minute we spend doing anything else than that, every minute we spend living our own adventure, is simply living into the curse of a moment without Him. A moment apart from choosing life. You see, I'm worried, church. I'm worried about the direction our country's going. Yeah. I'm worried about the choices many of our young people and our nation are making. I'm worried the world is going crazy and all I can do is hang on. I'm worried about the shooting that just happened in the church in Charleston last week. That really struck a chord with me. I'm a pastor. You know, I'm ready to die for my faith. I'm not ready for my brothers and sisters in Christ to die. I'm worried. But you know what I'm most concerned about? I'm most concerned Christians are more concerned about happiness than about being faithful. I told you earlier about my temptation, about how I am tempted to worship happiness. But I'm worried I'm not the only one. I'm concerned that I'm more concerned with keeping everybody at church happy than calling those to whom I minister to radical faithfulness. It's easier if I meddle less. Church, I'm worried I'm not the only one. I'm concerned I've made happiness an idol and chosen the path that seems easier, even though it's a path of idolatry. It's a path that leads to death and evil. Church, I'm concerned I'm not the only one. I'm concerned we have stopped participating in God's story and started choosing our own adventure. I'm concerned we have stopped choosing life and we've started worshiping idols. And we are so far away from knowing how to choose life that we don't even recognize that we're dying. And when we stop to pause and reflect, all we can do is blame others for their choices instead of repent for choosing our own adventure. So here's the thing. Like I said earlier, I didn't come to berate you. I didn't come to accuse you of anything. I've never been one to do that. I spend a lot of time with Pastor John and Donna. He brags about you guys all the time. He loves you guys. I know you guys are faithful. So, if the Spirit is working in your life, if you have chosen your own adventure, if you have placed idols before God, if you have been living a life of death, evil, and adversity, you can bring it to God. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to confess before the people of God. I'm going to confess the ways that I have chosen the path that leads to death and destruction and evil and adversity. The ways that I have chosen to live out my own adventure instead of participating in God's story, instead of choosing life. So here goes. Church, I confess that I have worshipped the idol happiness. Too often, I've chosen a life of ease and peace instead of faithfulness. There have been far too many times when the Spirit has prompted me to say or do something, and I have chosen happiness instead of faithfulness. Church, I confess I've worshipped the idol of sports. Instead of getting to know our teens at a deeper level, I've listened to them tell me a play-by-play on the latest football or baseball or whatever because it's easier. I probably spend as much time reading soccer news in a day as I do reading my Bible, and the way I live life reflects that. Church, I confess I've worshipped the idol of self. I've thought I've known everything. You can ask my parents and my wife. I've thought that I have to achieve to be loved. And God's been working on me with this. I know I'm loved by God because I'm His child, and there's nothing I can do to make Him love me more or to make Him love me less. But I don't think I always believe that. Church, I confess I've chosen my own adventure for far too long, and I'm done with it. Today, here and now, I choose life. I choose to immerse myself so deeply in the story of God that participating in God's story, participating in God's adventure, is second nature. I choose to love the Lord our God, obey His voice, and hold fast to Him every one of my days. And Deuteronomy was written to a people. So today, I choose to choose life in the midst of a people who have chosen life. When I immerse myself in God's story, that inevitably means I must immerse myself in God's people. So I commit that no matter how frustrated I get, no matter how jaded I feel, no matter what, I will come before God's people and confess when I've chosen to live my own adventure instead of choosing life. I don't know if I'm the only one here who needs to do this. I think there are others who might need to come to an altar. There are so many idols that wrestle for our attention. But the cry of my heart is that we as a people would choose life, and we would run away from anything else that calls for our worship. It's not the socially acceptable decision. It's not the decision that leads to happiness. It's not the decision that leads to monetary wealth. It's not the decision that leads to a long life. A lot of people now and in the past have been martyred for their faith. But it is the decision that leads to eternal life. It is the decision that leads to living life to its fullest, both here as long as we draw breath, and in the resurrection when we see the life giver and God says to us, "Well done, my good and faithful servant." So if we need to pray, if you need to confess as I have, here are the altars. You can give it up to God. We're going to sing Mighty to Save. Take this time. I'm going to take this time. And I'm going to pray, and I'm going to continue to confess the many ways that I have chosen to live out my own adventure instead of participating in God's story. And if you'd like to pray as well, the altars are open. You can also create your seat. And then at the end of the song, I'll come and close us in prayer.
Mm-hmm.